Bloodlines, lots of death coming for many people, including those who were not supposed to be here in the first place. Bloodlines, lots of death coming for a family. They've got ties to an event back in the 1950s. Bloodlines, lots of death, killing in hilarious ways. The barbecue goes awry and there's a tattoo parlor. Bloodlines, lots of death, killing everyone. A franchise saver is on the plate. Let's get going. Final Destination Bloodlines comes from the directors of Leprechaun Origins as well as Freaks. You know, that superhero movie that came out a few years ago that was shockingly the most viewed video on this particular channel. For some reason. It was a good movie. It's a little bit odd. That and RRR actually are the two highest viewed videos on this channel. Thank you guys very much for that if you are a long-time subscriber. Anyway, this is written by a few people. You have Laurie Evans Taylor, who did Bed Rest and The Cellar Door. It almost seems like those two could tie together. You need to be on bed rest, but stay away from the cellar door. So then we have John Watts, do you say? Not to be confused with Joel Watts, not to be confused with Eric Watts, thank God. Not to be confused with noted anti-Semite Bill Watts. So anyway, he directed Spider-Man Far From Home and No Way Home. It's a bit shocking that the director of those two movies wrote this, but whatever, you gotta have some fun. And Gary Busey. No, not to be confused with Gary Busey. He did Scream 5, he did Abigail. It should have been more fun than it was. And Ready or Not, Here I Come, You Can't Hide, Hide. And for those that are unfamiliar with the Final Destination timeline, you probably shouldn't start with this one. I think they're all on Max. If they're not on Max, they're on some streaming service. That being said, basically the idea is, starts with somebody getting a premonition, saving some people from a very, very confusing situation that will end up in death. And then death comes for them in often hilarious ways. The first one was the best, and then you had the second one that had the best opening with the freeway scene, and then kind of went off the goddamn rails. It did have Ali Larter in it, the gorgeous Ali Larter, I might add, who is not in this because, sorry, spoiler, she died in the second one. And then the third one that featured two of my favorite deaths, and then things kind of went downhill. The Final Destination in 2009 featured some of the worst CGI that I have seen in quite a long goddamn time, with 3D effects that movie cost an alleged $40 million. And then you look at My Bloody Valentine 3D that costs like, I think, half that, if not a little less than half that, and had way better effects. And My Bloody Valentine 3D had a bigger cast. Whole point is you then have Final Destination 5 that actually wrapped around to being a prequel of the first one. And that was a nice way to wrap it up. Well, then they decide, hey, we're going to do this. Actually, this has been in the works for a while. The original concept was going to involve paramedics or first responders, but they couldn't come up with a way to do the third act properly. I will say right now, some of this takes place in a hospital, so I think they kept some of that original treatment. They just worked it around differently. And given that I actually enjoyed Freaks quite a bit, and Leprechaun Origins was certainly a movie, and the writers involved, now we just need a cast. We have Caitlin Santa Juana, who plays Stephanie, who is haunted by nightmares, a recurring nightmare specifically, about something that takes place in a high-rise, not Space Needle, it's called the Skyview. It's not the Space Needle, shut up. They didn't get inspiration from the Space Needle. I'm not saying the Space Needle is the only design of its kind, but just looking at that as a Washingtonian, I mean, come on. Fucking come on. It's a great restaurant, but things go horribly awry, and it's this, nightmare that Stephanie keeps having, and she's wondering why the fuck she keeps having it. Then it turns out to actually tie back to her family bloodline, shall we say, and then she must suddenly save everybody from death's design. So, that being said, the trailers for this made it look kind of messy. There was one that they showed that featured an entire death sequence. And when I first saw the teaser for it, I go, alright. And then I saw the actual trailer and I go, don't know about that. It looks like it might be fun, goopy, gory horror. It does feature the last big screen performance of the late great Tony Todd, who played Bloodworth in the previous 5 movies. And also you do have Breck Basinger. I assume no relation to Kim, maybe, possibly, could be a second cousin for all I know. She plays Iris because she doesn't want the world to see her because she knows death is at her door. And if she is going to make it, she must keep her family away forevermore. So, basically the idea is there is a grandmother that has ties, that had the vision of this whole thing, and now death is coming for everybody. Everybody. Literally everybody. From an event in the 1950s. So that means a lot of goddamn people that weren't supposed to exist are, being killed over time and everything. So instead of death coming for like 8 to 10 people, it's coming for multiple goddamn people. And this ends up actually being the second best installment in the goddamn franchise. This is right up there with the first one for this reason. It nails the goddamn opening. The deaths are absolutely gut-bustingly hilarious. Maybe that's not exactly their intention, but I found a dark comedic feel to it because I'm a sick individual. And really my only complaint about this movie is that the characters are not terribly interesting. It does have a great send-off for Tony Todd, I do want to say that. But it's nothing even against the cast members themselves. But you have a hard time really rooting for anybody. And there are major logic loopholes. I mean, there are logic loopholes with all these goddamn movies, but this is as close to the first one as you're going to get, some 25 years after the first one came out. And I did like how they basically, went with the song references and stuff like that, and they actually understood the assignment, and they even had a nice tie back to the original movie that we'll talk about in the spoiler section. But this is a teetotal blast. This is a lot more fun than I expected. I absolutely recommend that you guys check this out because this is easily, again, second, or maybe even some people might feel this is better than the first Final Destination movie. I still say it's 1 and 2, 1 in this one. But nevertheless, performances are all right. It's just, it feels like it's trying to pay homage to the originals and trying to carve its own path. And it almost seems like it's suffering from like Scream 5 syndrome. Where it's not quite sure what it wants to do with a few characters, but it ends up doing more than enough. And obviously because Tony Todd has since passed away, they're not going to have him in this unless they somehow in secret filmed a 7th one and were able to include his scenes in there like they did with Carrie Fisher when they shot extra footage for the Star Wars, the remaining Star Wars sequels. But this is a pretty good send-off for his character and actually a really, really fine, I would say, finale for the series. It'll probably make a bunch of money if they'll want to do a 7th one, but I think really they should end on a high note here because I'm worried they'll try to get too much blood out of this turnip. It's in theaters if you want to check it out. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So that opening is fucking tremendous. In the Skyview Space Needle, and there's this kid that's digging these coins out of the fountain, and that factors in a little bit later on. You have Iris and her boyfriend, who basically, they aren't able to really get a reservation for the restaurant because unfortunately they're overbooked. Oh, and the elevator guy the bellhop, explains, yeah, they finished this whole high-rise thing way ahead of schedule. That's always good. That means they cut corners. And you can tell they cut corners because all these signs, the overcapacity of the elevator, the fact that you can see the beams kind of shaking. They wanted to get this place open. Because this is, of course, before major lawsuits. I mean, I'm not saying lawsuits didn't exist in the 50s, but I digress. But we see a lady that has a son that checks on Iris and notices that Iris is pregnant. And she's worried that her boyfriend's not going to want to be with her. He proposes to her. And he says, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. You mean with us? And he's like all shocked. And she's like, no, I'm sorry. He's like, what are you talking about? This is the greatest thing. Meanwhile, that jerk little kid is about to throw a penny off the goddamn thing. And then he doesn't throw the penny off because, the penny going through the person's head, that urban legend. Actually, it probably wouldn't be an urban legend at that height. But he throws it. And then it ends up getting sucked into a vent. And gets stuck behind a fan. And then breaks the fan. And then noxious, flammable fumes start coming in. Gas and everything. Meanwhile, the lady with her kid, I keep mentioning that because of a particular reason. She's checking on Iris. She's all good. They're going to get married. Shout, kick your heels up and shout. Throw your hands back and shout. Come on, don't forget to say you will. And they're dancing on a glass floor that's already starting to crack because of one particular object that hit, and it's obvious materials they used weren't exactly working all that great. And they had I See a Bad Moon Rising and Ring of Fire playing before that. And it's good song choices, I do want to say. And then once that floor starts to collapse, it is bedlam, it is destruction. That thing starts to bend. The kid manages to get down the stairs before the stairs collapse. The elevator breaks. All this stuff's going on, everything. The boyfriend ends up falling and destroying himself. You know, just everybody's falling. Bodies are hitting everywhere. And Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head was playing in the valet guys were watching as bodies are falling. I mean, it's fucking brilliant, great. 10 out of 10 no notes, as the kids used to say. And then the great thing is the kid manages to get away and he's all happy, and this lady gets crushed by this piano, and then suddenly the piano crushes him. And that's exactly what needs to happen to all those little shits that think they can do that. That's what you get, current generation, thinking you can do that. You're going to get crushed by a piano. Don't steal pennies. That penny factors in later on. So, bedlam, all this stuff. Iris manages to rescue the little boy. But then they're starting to fall, and they fall. She impales herself, and then suddenly we cut to Stephanie having this nightmare. And it turns out that woman actually was her grandmother. And she wants to find out more information about the grandmother, but the uncle doesn't want to tell her. Nobody wants to tell her. And even Stephanie's mother has run away, left after a number of years. Charlie is her cousin, a brother, distant cousin. I forget. No, brother. I think it's brother. Sorry, some of these the others are their cousins. There's Eric, who's the Richard Harmon. I assume no relation to Mark Harmon. Hopefully not. And basically, they end up kind of having a weird camaraderie after Stephanie goes to visit Iris. Iris is in this fortified fortress with spikes sticking out, all this stuff. As long as she doesn't step outside, then death won't get her. I guess she put a spell on this place. I don't know. Stephanie arrives. She has to put all her objects in there, because the aunt actually ends up giving Stephanie the information about all this stuff. And there's all this book of death. It's these articles, all this stuff, this family tree, charts, all this about all these people that were supposed to die, what order they were supposed to die in. Somehow she was able to retain all that. And she ended up basically... I apologize, by the way, if I seem like I'm not doing all that well. Kind of dealing with some rib and back pain, so I apologize, but I was able to endure it to watch this movie. So essentially, we get a discussion between grandmother and granddaughter, and she says to her, death is coming for all of us. I held it off as long as I could. And Stephanie goes to leave without taking the book. Then Iris steps outside and gives her the book, but then says, seeing is believing. She gets impaled by this little, weather dealy, the north-south deal. Not a windmill, but you know what the fuck I'm saying. And there's wind chimes and stuff like that, and a lot of glass breaks in this thing. There's a character named Bobby that is very allergic to peanuts. And Eric is kind of the emo type. And basically, Tony Todd doesn't actually show up for a very long time in this. But after Iris is killed, they decide they're going to hold a funeral. And then they hold a wake, essentially, a party. This is a thing you probably saw in the trailer, where a glass shatters, a piece of ice ends up in the goddamn ice. So you have to wonder who's going to end up drinking that. And there's also a rake underneath the trampoline. There's a lawnmower. There's all this stuff going on. And this is the best scene. This is best viewed as in full as possible. I'm just going to talk about a couple things. But basically, the glass, I think, was part of Stephanie and Charlie's dad, his drink. Mind you, in the interim, the mother shows back up. and has been living in an RV and that kind of stuff, living the nomad life. And she ends up, explaining later on that she was made to be paranoid about death coming for her and all this stuff, and she realizes she was doing that to her kids. That's why she ended up taking off. But before that, strained relationship. They're having some discussions, and basically this party ends up going tits up. There is one point where the mother gets the rake out from underneath the trampoline. Pretty good spot there. And then the trampoline rips. Stuff kind of goes sideways. The cup with the glass spills out. The glass is sticking up like this. Howard steps on it. And meanwhile, the mower ends up getting activated. And while he's stepping back and he falls back, the mower just comes up dead or alive style and just, ruins his head. And it's just great. Just butchers his head. It's a great death scene. And everybody's freaking out. So we got another funeral. We got that stuff. So it's cooking so far. It's doing some pretty good stuff. And then Stephanie looks at this book and figures out all this stuff and figures out who died on what side of the family and all that. Okay. And then there's another scene with Eric where he's sad about losing his dad. This is a tattoo parlor part that a lot of people have seen, where he ends up with the chain from the ceiling, hooked around the ceiling fan and dragging him up and everything and doing this. Chemicals are falling. It's burning, yearning, feeling inside me. Can't live. Living without you. Can't live anymore. That's playing throughout this whole thing. And they played that entire part in the trailer, which I really kind of fucking hated. But they ended up throwing a swerve because the place blows up. But then suddenly Eric is finally alive. And oh my God, Eric's alive. And then Eric has, I believe, his girlfriend, Julia, who, I've seen the actress before, but I can't name her right now. I can't name her. She does look familiar, though. And there's a point where it seems like Stephanie's really starting to see this shit. She's starting to really recognize this. So there's like this tree lopper thing. Boys playing soccer. A leaf blower. She says a leaf blower could blow the leaves, and the tree topper could end up, the tree topper could fall near him. He could turn to blow the leaves in way of the soccer player or the soccer boys playing in the garage or in the driveway, and then that could end up sending somebody into a truck. Now Eric almost gets hit by a truck, but doesn't. And then you see off in the distance there's this garbage truck. And then this hilarious part where he's like joking about the truck and everything, almost simulating humping it because this truck took forever to dump one trash can. Good trash service there. But then, meanwhile, a little bit after that, Julia is like running along. She's running along. She gets hit in the head with we have the leaf blower thing, gets hit in the head with the soccer ball, ends up in the trash can, ends up dumped in the goddamn trash deal. And one guy, and the trash compactor man, the trash man, is listening to Britney Spears' Stronger, I believe, and doesn't notice in time as Stephanie is trying to get Julia out. Julia gets crushed. Hilarious death, by the way. Really, really good. And then the idea is they've ended up visiting Bloodworth. They find out about this character, JB. John William Bloodworth, I believe is his name. And it turns out that boy that, Iris saved is Bloodworth. So all this time, basically, Death has been following him, trying to catch up to him because he knows all about this stuff. Him and Iris studied up on all this stuff and everything. Pretty significant. That was nice. That was a nice little tie there. And then he basically says the only way to cheat death is to kill someone or you die. Like in the second movie where the girl died flatline but then got brought back. But then we got 3 more movies out of it. Granted, one was a prequel. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it's fine. But Bobby is one of the family, and he has a peanut allergy. And that has been driven home. Like, he can't eat anything with peanuts, peanut butter cookies. Can't eat anything like a jar of peanut butter. Eric even throws that out of the RV before they go visit Bloodworth. And one of Tony Todd's last lines is, I'm going to try and enjoy the life that I have left. Some variation of that. And tells him good luck. Perfect but very eerie send-off given what happened to him. And then basically the idea is now Somebody's got to die, flatline, that's okay. And then they can reset it and be all right. Eric has a bright idea. Bobby, eat something with peanuts in it. We're in a hospital. You will flatline, and we'll get you saved and use the EpiPen if necessary, but you got to flatline. Well, then they end up inadvertently turning on the CAT scan machine. You know, it's very magnetic and everything. And that ends up getting turned up so high that metal pieces like the nipple rings and other stuff that Eric has on him fly into this thing. And Bobby, meanwhile, has eaten these peanut butter cups, and at first he didn't have the allergy, and then he had the allergy. And Eric has the EpiPen, and he gets sucked into the hole of the CAT scan machine, and it is just nuts. He's getting bent, destroyed. I mean, he's dead. I mean, he's clearly dead, but the wheelchair that they had there, all that, just bending around. And the metal, the magnetism is so good, it's starting to suck other stuff from the hospital there. And you would have thought more than one nurse would have known, or one receptionist, but never mind. Then they end up, basically, Bobby ends up saving himself. And a little bit earlier, when they got the peanut butter cups out of the vending machine, the spring popped out. And then, because the magnetism hadn't been stopped, the spring gets pulled out and goes right through his head and starts spinning around like that on the machine. It's a brilliant fucking death. I love it. So then, basically the idea is Mom, Charlie, and Stephanie decide they're going to take the RV and they're going to go to Grandma's cabin. Death is suddenly not going to let them do that, so Death is trying to stop them. They end up basically by this little creek, or this little lake, or whatever it is, after ramming the gate. And the idea is the mother is trying to stop, trying to prevent her kids that she abandoned, but she loves her kids, but she abandoned them from being killed. So then they end up basically, the mother and Charlie end up under the remnants of the blown up cabin when Death sends a spark in and attacks the element. Not the fifth element, there are only 4 elements on that. Casio! But that being said, the mother's half blown up. Charlie's pinned down. Meanwhile, Stephanie is in the lake because a piece of her seatbelt clamp got taken out. So now she can't hit the button. And her thing's locked in. She's drowning. So, much like the second movie, with the drowning in the lake. Then the mother ends up helping Charlie up and says, go save your sister. Don't worry, I'm going to stay alive as long as possible. And she gets crushed by a power pole. It was hilarious. So, even though there is a point where using a straight razor, Charlie ends up kind of cutting his finger, he manages to save his sister, brings her back, and all is well. We get an epilogue where Charlie has his prom suit. And he's looking great, and Stephanie's like, yay, he saved me. And then the one guy, I think he's the father of the girl that Charlie is taking to prom, says, well, if your heart didn't stop, technically it didn't. And a little bit earlier in the hospital scene, the same penny, ended up outside the hospital. This old lady that Eric had talked to before got the penny and then used it to buy some lemonade from a girl's lemonade stand. That cursed penny for your thoughts, Death. They end up realizing, oh shit, maybe it's not over, and then this penny flies out and then ends up in the train tracks conveniently that are apparently located just over there outside of this little suburb area. That doesn't look like those train tracks would be anywhere near it. And train tracks factor in to the opening of the movie where a red car goes across and there's another red car here. Then suddenly the train derails and it looks like Charlie and Stephanie might get away, but no, Stephanie gets crushed, Charlie gets crushed, and then the train comes in, and that's it. And that says, memory of Tony Todd. Tony Todd fans cry, and that is it for Final Destination Bloodlines. I don't know if they need to do another one. They probably will if this one's successful, but I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, and I didn't think I would. A+. It gets a high recommendation from me. Agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.